The blood dripped between her fingers as Helena Owen staggered down the muddy main street of Abilene, Texas, clutching her side where the bullet had grazed her ribs during the stagecoach robbery 3 miles outside town. It was August 1878, and the scorching afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she stumbled toward the two-story building with the painted sign that read Abilene Inn, her vision blurring with each agonizing step. She had watched the bandits murder the driver and the guard, had felt the searing pain as a stray bullet tore through her traveling dress, and had somehow managed to hide in the brush until they rode away with the strongbox. For 2 hours she had walked, leaving a trail of crimson drops in the dust, knowing that if she did not find help soon, she would bleed out under the relentless Texas sky. The innkeeper, a portly man with graying whiskers and suspicious eyes, took one look at her blood-soaked dress and held up both hands as if to physically push her back through the doorway. "No, madam, not here. I run a respectable establishment and I will not have trouble brought to my door. You get on out of here before you bring whatever hell is chasing you right into my lobby." Helena tried to speak, to explain, but her knees buckled and she grasped the doorframe to keep from collapsing. "Please, I need a doctor. I have been shot. The stage was robbed and I said no." The innkeeper's voice was hard as iron. "I do not care what happened. You go find the sheriff or the doc yourself, but you are not bleeding all over my clean floors." He moved to close the door, and Helena felt despair wash over her as the world tilted sideways. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. She looked up through tears and pain to see a man in his mid-20s, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of aged whiskey. Dust covered his worn leather vest and denim trousers, and his sun-bronzed face showed concern rather than fear. "What in God's name is wrong with you?" he demanded of the innkeeper, his voice carrying the rough edge of someone who had spent years working cattle and sleeping under stars. "This woman is hurt." "Not my problem, Owen," the innkeeper said firmly. "And if you know what is good for you, it will not be yours either." The cowboy, whose full name Helena would later learn was Owen Keller, ignored the innkeeper completely. He shifted his grip and lifted her into his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing, turning toward the stairs. "I have a room on the second floor. You can stand there and let your conscience rot, or you can fetch the doctor. Your choice." Helena tried to protest, tried to say she could not impose, but the pain was too intense, and the relief of being held, of being helped, overwhelmed her ability to speak. She pressed her hand harder against her wound and felt Owen's steady heartbeat beneath her cheek as he carried her up the narrow staircase, his boots thudding on the worn wood. Behind them, she heard the innkeeper sputtering objections, but Owen paid him no mind whatsoever. The room was small but clean, with a single bed covered by a patchwork quilt, a washstand with a chipped porcelain basin, and a window overlooking the street. Owen laid her down gently on the bed, and Helena immediately tried to sit up, mortified that she was ruining his bedding with her blood. "I cannot, you should not. I will ruin everything." "Hush now," Owen said, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone so rough around the edges. "You just lie still and let me have a look at that wound." He moved to the washstand and poured water into the basin, then grabbed a clean towel from the hook on the wall. When he returned to the bedside, his expression was serious but calm. "I am going to need to move your hand so I can see how bad it is. This is going to hurt some." Helena nodded, biting her lip as he carefully peeled her blood-soaked hand away from her side. The bullet had torn through the fabric of her dress and left a deep furrow across her ribs, bleeding freely but not, she prayed, fatally. Owen's jaw tightened as he examined the wound, and then he began to work with steady, practiced hands. He pressed the wet towel against her side, applying firm pressure, and Helena gasped at the pain but did not cry out. "You have done this before," she managed to say through gritted teeth. "Worked cattle drives for 6 years," Owen replied, not looking up from his task. "You see all kinds of injuries. Men getting gored by steers, trampled by horses, cut by barbed wire. I am no doctor, but I know enough to keep a person from bleeding to death." He paused, meeting her eyes. "The bullet went clean through the side, just took a chunk of flesh. Hurts like hell, I am sure, but you will live if we can stop the bleeding and keep infection out." Relief flooded through Helena with such force that she felt tears spring to her eyes. She had been so certain she was going to die on that dusty road. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not even know your name." "Owen Keller," he said, pressing harder on the wound. "And you are Helena Owens. I was traveling to meet my aunt in Fort Worth. She runs a millinery shop and offered me work after my parents passed last winter." The words tumbled out as if she needed to explain herself, to justify her presence. "The stage was robbed just outside town. They killed the driver and the guard. I hid in the brush, but a bullet found me anyway." Owen's expression darkened. "The Dalton gang, most likely. They have been hitting stages all through this territory for the past month. Sheriff is useless, bought off, or scared. I cannot tell which." He lifted the towel and examined her wound again, then nodded with satisfaction. "Bleeding is slowing. I am going to clean this proper now. Do you want something to bite down on? I have a leather strap in my saddlebag." Helena shook her head, though she was terrified. "Just do it quickly." He worked with efficiency and surprising gentleness, cleaning the wound with whiskey from a bottle he kept in his pack, which made Helena see stars and clutch the quilt with white-knuckled fists. Then he produced a needle and thread, and she realized he meant to stitch her up right there in his room. "You really do not need to do this," she said weakly. "Surely there is a doctor. Doc Preston is 3 sheets to the wind by this time of day," Owen said bluntly. "You want him coming at you with shaking hands and whiskey breath. Or you want me to do it steady and sober." She chose him, and endured the strange tugging sensation as he carefully stitched the worst of the wound closed. His hands were calloused and rough from years of hard work, but they moved with precision and care. When he finally tied off the last stitch and bandaged her side with strips of clean cloth torn from one of his own shirts, Helena felt exhausted but safe for the first time since the attack. "You should rest now," Owen said, standing and carrying the bloodied towels to the washstand. "I will sit here and keep watch. Make sure you do not develop a fever or start bleeding again." "You cannot stay here all night," Helena protested, though the idea of being alone terrified her. "This is your room, your bed. I have already imposed too much." Owen pulled the single chair over beside the bed and sat down, stretching his long legs out in front of him. "Lady, I have slept on the ground with nothing but a saddle for a pillow more times than I can count. A night in a chair will not kill me. Besides, I want to make sure you are all right." Something in his tone, in the way he looked at her with those warm brown eyes, made Helena's heart do an odd little skip. She was not so naive that she did not recognize kindness when she saw it, but there was something more in Owen Keller's attention, something that made her feel seen and protected in a way she had not experienced since her father died. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. "You do not know me at all." Owen was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the window where the late afternoon sun painted the room in shades of gold. "My sister died 5 years ago," he said finally. "She was traveling to California with her husband, and they got caught by bandits. Nobody helped her. Nobody stopped to see if she was all right. By the time someone found them, it was too late." He looked back at Helena, and she saw old pain in his eyes. I swore then that I would never turn away from someone who needed help, so you do not need to thank me. I am just doing what should have been done for her. Helena felt tears slide down her temples into her hair. I am so sorry. That is an unbearable loss. It was, Owen agreed, but it taught me something about the kind of man I want to be. He reached over and adjusted the blanket he had pulled over her. Now you rest. I will wake you if I need to check that bandage. She wanted to stay awake, to talk more with this stranger who had saved her life, but exhaustion and blood loss pulled her under like a dark tide. When she woke, the room was dim with evening shadows and Owen was lighting the oil lamp on the small table. He noticed her stirring and came to the bedside immediately. "How do you feel?" he asked, pressing the back of his hand to her forehead. "No fever yet, that is good." "Thirsty," Helena said, her voice raspy. "And hungry, I think, though that seems wrong to say." Owen smiled, and the expression transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. "It is a good sign when you want to eat, means your body is fighting to heal." He poured water from the pitcher into a tin cup and helped her sit up enough to drink without choking. The water was lukewarm but tasted like heaven. Then he produced a cloth-wrapped bundle from somewhere. "I went down while you were sleeping and got some bread and cheese from the kitchen. Had to pay extra since the innkeeper is being a horse's rear end about this whole situation, but at least he took my money." They shared the simple meal, and Helena found herself studying Owen's face in the lamplight. He had strong features, a straight nose that looked like it had been broken at least once, and a mouth that seemed more accustomed to firm lines than smiles. Though when he did smile, it reached all the way to his eyes. There was a scar on his jaw, pale against his tanned skin, and his hands were scarred too, evidence of a life spent working with animals and rope and weather. He was handsome in a rough, unpolished way that had nothing to do with fine clothes or soft living, and everything to do with character and strength. "What brought you to Abilene?" Helena asked, wanting to know more about this man who had literally carried her to safety. Owen tore off a piece of bread and handed it to her. "I have been working as a ranch hand for the Triple Bar spread about 20 miles north of here. Came into town to collect supplies and have been meaning to head back, but my horse threw a shoe and the blacksmith is backed up with work. Figured I would stay the night and leave in the morning." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "Guess I am staying a bit longer now." "You do not have to," Helena said, though her heart sank at the thought of him leaving. "I am sure I will be fine on my own now." "You are not fine," Owen said bluntly. "You have a bullet wound that could get infected. You have no money since I am guessing the bandits took everything, and you are in a town where the innkeeper would rather throw you in the street than help you. I am not leaving until I know you are going to be all right." His protectiveness should have felt presumptuous, but instead it warmed something deep inside Helena that had been cold since her parents died. "You are a good man, Owen Keller," she said softly. He looked uncomfortable with the praise, shifting in his chair. "I am just a man doing what is right." Nothing special about that. But it was special, Helena thought as she drifted back to sleep. In a world where people turned away from trouble, where violence was met with closed doors and hard hearts, Owen's simple decency shone like a beacon. She fell asleep feeling safer than she had in months, knowing he was watching over her. The next 3 days followed a pattern. Owen checked her wound regularly, changing the bandages and making sure infection did not set in. He brought her food, helped her sit up when she needed to, and sat by the window reading old newspapers or whittling small figures from scraps of wood while she rested. They talked for hours, and Helena learned that Owen had been born in Missouri, that his parents had died of cholera when he was 14, that he had practically raised his younger sister before she married and moved west. He told her about cattle drives that lasted months, about sleeping under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch, about the satisfaction of honest work with honest men. In turn, Helena told him about growing up in a small town in Louisiana, about her mother's skill with a needle and her father's work as a schoolteacher. She spoke of losing them both to influenza within a week of each other, of the loneliness that followed, of her aunt's letter offering her a new start in Texas. She found herself sharing things she had not spoken of to anyone, and Owen listened with an intensity that made her feel heard in a way she never had before. On the fourth day, Helena insisted on standing, and Owen helped her to her feet with careful hands on her arms. She was weak and dizzy, but the wound was healing cleanly and the pain had dulled to a persistent ache. "I need to get to Fort Worth," she said, hating how shaky her voice sounded. "My aunt will be worried. The stage was supposed to arrive days ago." "You are not getting on another stage," Owen said firmly. "Not until we know the Dalton gang has been caught or moved on to terrorize some other territory." "I cannot stay here forever," Helena pointed out. "The innkeeper barely tolerates my presence as it is, and only because you are paying him extra." Owen was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as if he was wrestling with a decision. Finally, he said, "Come to the Triple Bar with me. The ranch owner's wife, Mrs. Catherine King. She is a kind woman. She will give you work if you need it, or at least a safe place to stay until you are fully healed and can make arrangements to get to Fort Worth safely." Helena stared at him, her heart pounding. "I could not ask you to do that. You have already done so much." "You are not asking, I am offering." Owen's gaze was steady and serious. "Truth is, Helena, I do not like the idea of you traveling alone or staying in this town without protection. At the ranch there are good people. You would be safe." She should have been wary of accepting such an offer from a man she had known less than a week. But Helena had learned to trust her instincts, and every instinct she possessed told her that Owen Keller was exactly who he appeared to be. A man of honor trying to do right by someone in need. More than that, she did not want to say goodbye to him yet. The thought of watching him ride away and never seeing him again made her chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with her injury. "All right," she said softly. "I will come with you to the ranch, at least until I am stronger." The smile that spread across Owen's face was worth every moment of pain and fear she had endured. "Good. That is good. We will leave tomorrow morning if you are feeling up to it. It is a half-day ride and we will take it slow." That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and red over Abilene, Owen went out and returned with a simple cotton dress in a sensible brown color, along with a shawl and a bonnet. "Figured you would want something clean to wear," he said, looking slightly embarrassed as he handed her the bundle. "The lady at the dry goods store helped me pick something that might fit." Helena took the clothes with trembling hands, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "You have spent so much money on me already. I will pay you back, I swear it, as soon as I am able to work." Owen shook his head. "I do not want your money, Helena. I just want you to be all right." That night, after she had changed into the new dress with great difficulty and much gritting of teeth, Helena sat on the edge of the bed and watched Owen prepare his bedroll on the floor. He had refused to let her feel guilty about taking his bed, had insisted that he was comfortable, but she could see the stiffness in his shoulders and knew he was being far too generous. "Owen," she said quietly, and he looked up at her. "Thank you for everything. I know I have said it before, but I do not think I can say it enough. You saved my life." He stood, crossing to stand before her, and Helena had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I am glad I was there," he said simply. "And I am glad you are going to be all right." He hesitated, then added, "I know we have not known each other long, but I hope we can be friends. Real friends, friends. The word should have been enough, but as Helena looked into his warm brown eyes and remembered how safe she felt in his arms, she knew that what she was beginning to feel for Owen Keller went far beyond friendship. Still, she smiled and said, "I would like that very much." The next morning dawned clear and hot. Owen borrowed a gentle mare from the livery stable, paying extra to keep her for a week, and helped Helena into the saddle with hands that lingered perhaps a moment longer than necessary at her waist. He mounted his own horse, a rangy buckskin gelding named Sam, and they set out at a slow walk, leaving Abilene behind. The ride to the Triple Bar Ranch was long but beautiful. They followed a well-worn trail through rolling grassland dotted with mesquite and live oak, past creeks that ran shallow in the August heat. Owen kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the ranch and the people who worked there. He was patient when she needed to rest, never making her feel weak or burdensome, and by the time they crested a rise and she saw the ranch spread out below them, Helena felt as if she had known him for years rather than days. The Triple Bar was larger than she had expected, with a big ranch house built of stone and timber, several barns, a bunkhouse for the hands, and corrals full of horses and cattle. Chickens scratched in the yard, and a pair of dogs came running up to greet them as they rode in. Owen dismounted and came to help Helena down, and she was grateful because her side was aching fiercely, and she felt light-headed from the long ride. A woman emerged from the ranch house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was in her early 40s, with graying blonde hair pulled back in a bun, and a face that was lined with sun and smile creases. "Owen Keller, where have you been?" she called out, her voice carrying across the yard. "Tom was about ready to send someone into town to look for you." "Had some unexpected business, Mrs. King," Owen said, keeping one hand on Helena's elbow to steady her. "This is Miss Helena Owens. She was hurt when the stage was robbed outside Abilene. I was hoping you might have room for her here while she heals up." Catherine King's expression shifted from curiosity to concern in an instant. She hurried over, her sharp eyes taking in Helena's pale face and the careful way she held herself. "Lord have mercy, of course we have room. Come inside, dear. Let us get you settled." She looked at Owen with approval. "You did the right thing bringing her here. Tom," she called toward the barn. "Tom, come help Owen with the horses." A tall man with a weathered face and kind eyes emerged from the barn. This was Tom King, the ranch owner, and after Owen quickly explained the situation, he nodded and took the horse's reins. "Get her inside and comfortable. We will talk later." The ranch house was cool and welcoming, with whitewashed walls and sturdy furniture that spoke of comfort rather than luxury. Catherine settled Helena in a small bedroom off the kitchen, insisting she lie down immediately. "Let me see this wound," she said in a tone that brooked no argument, and Helena found herself obeying this motherly woman without hesitation. Catherine examined Owen's stitchwork with a critical eye, then nodded. "He did a fine job. Better than Doc Preston would have managed, that is for certain." "You are lucky Owen found you, Miss Owens. Please call me Helena, and I know how lucky I am." Helena glanced toward the doorway where Owen stood, his hat in his hands, looking uncertain. "He has been incredibly kind." "That is Owen," Catherine said warmly. "Best hand we have ever had, and not just because he works hard. He is a good man through and through." She bustled around, bringing fresh water and clean bandages. "Now you are going to stay here and rest properly. No arguments. We have plenty of room and plenty of work if you are wanting to earn your keep once you are healed, but for now you just focus on getting better." Tears pricked at Helena's eyes again. After the innkeeper's cruelty, Such open-hearted generosity felt overwhelming. I do not know what to say. Thank you. Catherine patted her hand. No thanks needed. We take care of our own out here, and anyone Owen brings to this ranch is one of our own. Over the following weeks, Helena healed under Catherine's watchful care and Owen's constant attention. He checked on her every morning before heading out to work, and every evening he would sit with her on the porch, telling her about his day while the sun set in spectacular colors across the Texas sky. She learned that he had a quiet sense of humor, that he was patient with the younger ranch hands who made mistakes, that he had a gift with horses that bordered on magical. She watched him work from her window, saw the easy strength in his movements as he roped and rode and mended fences, and felt her heart slipping away piece by piece. By the end of the third week, Helena was well enough to help Catherine in the kitchen and with light chores around the house. She discovered that she enjoyed ranch life, the rhythm of hard work and simple pleasures. She also discovered that Owen Keller was never far from her thoughts. The way he smiled at her across the dinner table made her pulse race. The sound of his voice calling goodnight through her bedroom door made her feel warm and safe. When their hands accidentally touched while washing dishes, she felt electricity arc between them. One evening in late September, as the worst of the summer heat finally broke, Owen asked if she would take a walk with him. They strolled down to the creek that ran through the property, and Helena watched the water ripple over smooth stones while trying to calm her racing heart. She knew somehow that this moment mattered. "Your wound has healed well," Owen said, his hands shoved in his pockets as if he did not quite know what to do with them. "You barely even limp anymore. Catherine has been wonderful, and you." Helena looked up at him. "I owe you my life, Owen." He shook his head. "You do not owe me anything, Helena. I did what anyone should have done." "But not what everyone would have done," she pointed out. "The innkeeper certainly did not." Owen was quiet for a moment, staring out at the darkening sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. "I need to tell you something," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "I know you have been planning to go to Fort Worth to meet your aunt and start your new life. And I know you have every right to do that. But Helena, he stopped, took a breath, then turned to face her fully. "I do not want you to go. I know it is selfish, and I know we have not known each other long, but these past weeks with you here, they have been the best weeks of my life. When I look at you, I see everything good and beautiful in this world. I see a future I did not think I could have. And I am asking, hoping really, that maybe you feel something too." Helena's breath caught in her throat. Her heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Owen, I feel everything," she whispered. "From the moment you caught me in that doorway, you have been all I think about. You are kind and strong and good, and when I am with you, I feel like I have finally found where I belong. But I do not want you to feel obligated because you saved me. I do not want gratitude to be confused with something else." Owen closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, his hands coming up to cup her face with infinite gentleness. "This is not obligation, Helena. This is not gratitude. This is me falling in love with you more every single day and not knowing how to live without you now that I have found you." "Oh, Owen," Helena breathed, and then his mouth was on hers, tender and careful, as if she was something precious that might break. She kissed him back with all the emotion that had been building inside her for weeks, her hands fisting in his shirt to pull him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she smiled up at him with tears in her eyes. "I love you too. I think I started loving you the moment you defied that innkeeper and carried me upstairs." Owen laughed, a sound of pure joy, and spun her around carefully, mindful of her healing wound. "Marry me," he said when he set her back down. I know it is fast, and I know I do not have much to offer except hard work and a cowboy's wages, but I swear I will spend every day trying to make you happy." "Yes," Helena said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married a month later in the parlor of the ranch house, with Tom King standing as witness and Catherine crying happy tears. Helena wore a simple white dress that Catherine had altered from her own wedding gown, and Owen wore his best shirt and looked so handsome that Helena could barely breathe when she saw him waiting for her. The circuit preacher spoke words about love and commitment, but Helena barely heard them over the thundering of her heart. When Owen slipped a simple gold band on her finger, a ring he had ridden into town to purchase, spending nearly all his savings, she felt complete in a way she had never imagined possible. Their wedding night was spent in a small cabin on the edge of the ranch property that Tom had offered them as living quarters. Owen carried her over the threshold, and they made love with a tenderness and passion that left them both breathless and amazed. Afterward, lying wrapped in his arms, Helena traced the scars on his hands and marveled at how her life had changed. 6 weeks ago she had been bleeding and terrified, certain she was going to die. Now she was married to the man she loved, safe and cherished, with a future stretching bright before her. "I still cannot believe you said yes," Owen murmured into her hair. Helena tilted her head back to look at him. "I cannot believe you asked." "Owen Keller, you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. You are my miracle," he said seriously. "The day I caught you falling in that doorway, my whole life changed. I thank God every day that I was there, that I could help you, that you chose to stay with me." "I will always choose you," Helena promised, and sealed it with a kiss. Their first year of marriage was filled with hard work and simple joys. Helena became an integral part of the ranch, helping Catherine with cooking and mending, tending the kitchen garden, and learning to ride well enough that she could help move cattle between pastures when extra hands were needed. Owen continued his work as a ranch hand, but he had dreams of saving enough to buy his own small spread someday, and Helena supported those dreams wholeheartedly. They were happy in their little cabin, content with their simple life. Owen came home every evening to Helena's cooking and her smile, and she greeted him with kisses and stories about her day. They made love under quilts in the winter and with windows open to catch the breeze in summer. They argued occasionally about silly things like whether to plant corn or beans in the garden, but the arguments never lasted because neither could bear to be at odds with the other. In the spring of 1880, Helena discovered she was pregnant. She told Owen one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He pulled her into his arms and buried his face in her hair, his shoulders shaking with emotion. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. A real baby. Their son was born in December during a cold snap that left frost on the windows. Owen paced the cabin like a caged animal while Catherine and the midwife attended to Helena, and when he was finally allowed in to meet his child, he wept openly at the sight of his wife holding their tiny son. They named him James Owen Keller, after Owen's father, and from the moment the boy opened his eyes, Owen was completely devoted. Watching her husband with their son, seeing the gentleness with which he held that tiny body and the awe on his face when James wrapped a miniature hand around his finger, Helena fell in love with Owen all over again. He was a wonderful father, patient and playful, singing lullabies in his rough cowboy voice and walking the floor at night when James was fussy so Helena could rest. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter they named Sarah Catherine, after Owen's late sister and the woman who had given them such generous hospitality. Sarah had her mother's dark hair and her father's brown eyes, and she was a happy, easy baby who rarely cried. James was fascinated by his little sister, always wanting to help care for her, and Helena would often find Owen sitting with both children, telling them stories about the cattle drives he had been on and the wide open spaces of Texas. By 1885, 7 years after that fateful day in Abilene, Owen had saved enough money to purchase a small ranch of his own about 10 miles from the Triple Bar. It was not a large spread, just 160 acres with a modest house and a barn that needed repairs, but it was theirs. Helena cried when Owen carried her over the threshold of their new home, remembering that night after their wedding, remembering how far they had come. They named the ranch the Lucky Star, because Owen said Helena was his lucky star, the light that had guided him to a life he had never dreamed possible. They worked that land together, building it up slowly and carefully. Owen raised cattle and broke horses, developing a reputation for training animals that were reliable and even tempered. Helena kept the books, managed the household, raised their children, and somehow found time to start a small business selling her preserves and baked goods in town. Life was not always easy. There were years when the rain did not come and they worried about their cattle. There were times when money was tight and they had to make difficult decisions about what to spend and what to save. But through it all, they had each other. Owen never failed to kiss Helena goodbye in the morning and hello when he came in for supper. Helena never stopped looking at her husband with love and admiration, never took for granted the way he cherished her. In 1887, they welcomed another son, Michael, and in 1890, another daughter, Elizabeth. Their home was filled with noise and laughter, with the sound of children playing and Owen's voice reading aloud from adventure novels in the evenings. Helena would stand in the doorway sometimes, watching her family gathered around the fireplace, and feel overwhelming gratitude for the twisting path that had led her here. James grew into a serious, thoughtful young man who had his father's way with horses. Sarah was bright and spirited, always asking questions and wanting to learn everything. Michael was the quiet one, content to spend hours watching insects in the grass or carving small figures from wood. Elizabeth was their baby, doted on by her older siblings and utterly fearless. They were good children, kind and hardworking, and both Owen and Helena were immensely proud of them. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1879, Owen surprised Helena by taking her back to Abilene. They left the children with Catherine and Tom and rode into town together, Helena behind Owen on Sam, because they could not afford to leave 2 horses behind. The town had grown in the past decade, had become more civilized with the arrival of the railroad, but Helena still remembered vividly staggering down that dusty street with blood dripping between her fingers. Owen led her to the inn where they had met. It was under new ownership now, run by a friendly couple from Kansas, and they rented the same room where Owen had tended Helena's wound all those years ago. Standing in that room, Helena felt emotion overwhelm her. "I could have died that day," she said softly. "If you had not been there, if you had walked past like everyone else, I would have died." Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "But I was there, and you did not die. And every good thing in my life has come from being in the right place at that exact moment." He tilted her chin up so he could look into her eyes. "I love you more now than I did the day we married, Helena Keller. You are my heart, my home, my everything." They made love in that little room with the afternoon sun slanting through the window, and it was both a celebration of all they had survived and a promise of all the years still to come. Afterward, lying tangled together, Helena traced the lines that time and hard work had added to Owen's face. He was 37 now, his dark hair showing threads of silver at the temples, his hands scarred and calloused from decades of ranch work. But to her, he was the most handsome man alive. "No regrets?" he asked, watching her face. "Not a single one," Helena said firmly. "I was supposed to go to Fort Worth and work in my aunt's shop. Instead, I found you, and I found a life more wonderful than anything I could have imagined." "Did you ever write to your aunt?" Owen asked. "Tell her what happened." Helena nodded. "I wrote her a month after we married. She wrote back saying she was happy for me, and that I should follow my heart. She moved to Denver a few years later and remarried. We still exchange letters at Christmas." They returned to the Lucky Star the next day, and their children ran out to greet them with shouts of excitement. Owen swung each of them up in turn, even James, who was getting too big for it, and Helena stood watching with her heart so full she thought it might burst. This was her family. This was her life. All because a cowboy with a kind heart had refused to walk past a bleeding woman in need. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. James married a sweet girl from town in 1895 and brought her home to the Lucky Star, where they built a small house on the property and began their own family. Sarah followed her dream of becoming a teacher, studying hard and eventually taking a position at the schoolhouse in the nearest town. Michael discovered a talent for blacksmithing and apprenticed himself to the smithy in Abilene. Elizabeth, their wild child, learned to rope and ride as well as any cowboy, and swore she was never getting married because she wanted to run her own ranch someday. Owen and Helena watched their children grow and thrive with deep satisfaction. They had given them a good life, had taught them the values of hard work and integrity and kindness. On quiet evenings, when the children were all occupied with their own pursuits, Owen and Helena would sit on the porch of their home and watch the stars come out, just as they had done for 20 years. "You remember the first night we talked?" Helena asked one such evening in 1898. She was 42 now, her dark hair showing silver strands, her face lined with sun and smile wrinkles. Owen was 50, his body still strong but moving with the stiffness that came from decades of hard physical labor. "You told me about your sister, about how losing her taught you the kind of man you wanted to be." "I remember," Owen said, his hand finding hers and squeezing gently. "I remember everything about those days. You became exactly that kind of man," Helena said softly. "You became someone who helps people, who stands up for what is right, who makes the world better just by being in it. Our children know that. They see it every day in the way you live." Owen was quiet for a moment, then he said, "I could not have become that man without you, Helena. You gave me a reason to be better, to try harder. You gave me a family and a home and a purpose. Everything good in my life comes back to you." "We saved each other," Helena said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You saved my life that day in Abilene, but I think maybe I saved yours too. We were both adrift, both grieving, both looking for something to hold on to, and we found each other. Best thing I ever did was walk into that inn at exactly the right moment," Owen said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Changed everything." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Inside the house, they could hear Elizabeth singing while she washed the supper dishes, and from across the yard came James's voice calling to his children. This was their legacy, Helena thought. Not land or money or possessions, but love and family and the knowledge that they had built something good and lasting together. In 1900, as the century turned and a new era began, Owen and Helena celebrated their 22nd anniversary surrounded by their children and grandchildren. James and his wife had given them 3 grandchildren, and Sarah, who had married a fellow teacher despite all her protests about wanting to focus on her career, was expecting her first child. The house was full of laughter and noise, and Owen looked around the table with profound contentment. "I want to make a toast," he said, standing and raising his glass. Everyone quieted, turning to look at him. 22 years ago, I married the most incredible woman I have ever known. She was brave enough to trust a stranger, strong enough to survive terrible circumstances, and generous enough to build a life with a simple cowboy who had nothing to offer but his heart. Helena, you have given me everything. 4 amazing children, a home filled with love, and a reason to wake up grateful every single morning. I love you more than words can say." "Here, here," James called out, and everyone clinked their glasses together. Helena stood, tears streaming down her face, and walked around the table to her husband. "Owen Keller, you saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You gave me love when I had lost everything. You gave me a home when I was lost, and you gave me a family when I thought I would be alone forever. I thank God every day for the moment you walked into that inn and refused to turn away." They kissed to the cheers and applause of their family, and then the party continued late into the night with music and dancing and stories. As Helena was whirled around the floor in her husband's arms, she looked into his eyes and saw the same love that had been there from the beginning, only deepened and strengthened by years of partnership and commitment. Later, when the guests had all gone home and the house was finally quiet, Owen and Helena stood on their porch one last time, looking out at the land they had built together. "No regrets?" Owen asked, just as he had all those years ago in Abilene. "Not a single one," Helena answered, just as she always did. "You are still the best thing that ever happened to me, Owen Keller. And you are my miracle," he said, pulling her close. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after that." They went inside together, to the home they had made, to the bed they had shared for over 2 decades, to the life they had built from a moment of kindness in a dusty Texas town. Helena fell asleep in Owen's arms, just as she had done thousands of times before, safe and loved and profoundly grateful for the twisting path that had led her to bleed on a doorstep in Abilene and into the arms of a cowboy who refused to turn away. Their love story, born from tragedy and kindness, had blossomed into something beautiful and lasting. They had raised good children, built a prosperous ranch, and created a legacy of love and integrity that would carry on through generations. And it had all started with a simple choice: to help someone in need, to see past fear and inconvenience to the suffering of another human being, to carry a bleeding woman to safety and tend her wounds with gentle hands. Years later, when Helena and Owen were old and gray, sitting on their porch watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard, people would sometimes ask them how they had built such a strong marriage, how they had stayed in love for so many decades. Owen would always smile and take his wife's hand, and Helena would tell the story of a stagecoach robbery, a cruel innkeeper, and a cowboy who refused to walk away. She would describe how he had carried her to safety, how he had stitched her wound and sat watch over her, how he had offered her not just his help but his heart. "Love is not just about the good times," Helena would say. "It is about showing up when things are hard. It is about seeing someone at their worst, their most vulnerable, and choosing to help anyway. Owen did that for me, and I have spent every day since trying to do the same for him." And Owen would nod and add, "The best things in life come from choosing kindness, from refusing to turn away even when it would be easier. I nearly lost everything good before I found Helena. But I learned from losing my sister that every moment matters, every choice counts. And the choice to help that bleeding woman in Abilene was the best choice I ever made. They lived long lives, Owen and Helena Keller, long enough to see the turn of the century and the changing of an era. They saw automobiles replace horses, saw their wild frontier become settled and civilized, saw their children and great-grandchildren carry their legacy forward into a new world. Through it all, they remained each other's greatest love and strongest support, two people who had found each other in the darkest moment and built a life full of light. When Owen died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, with Helena holding his hand and whispering words of love, she grieved deeply, but without regret. They had been given 48 years together, 48 years of love and partnership and joy. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by her large and loving family, and when she finally joined Owen in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking the Lucky Star, it was with a smile on her face and peace in her heart. Their story became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The tale of how a cowboy had saved a dying woman and found love in the process. How kindness and courage had created a legacy that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes. And always, the story ended the same way, with the reminder that love is a choice, that kindness matters, and that the smallest actions can change the entire course of a life. The Lucky Star Ranch remained in the family for generations, a testament to what Owen and Helena had built together. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the stars came out over the Texas sky, family members swore they could feel the presence of the couple who had started it all, still watching over the land they had loved, still together, even in death as they had been in life. Their love story echoing through the ages as a reminder of all that is good and true and lasting in this world.